Hey, what's up guys, how's it going? In today's video, I'm gonna explain TypeScript generics. Now, I have already written a blog post about it on my website. You can check that out. I'll put the link on the description. Alright, so I have an empty generics file, and on the right hand side, I have another tab which will run the generics file. So, what is TypeScript generics? Actually, before we learn about TypeScript generics, let me give you an example of what that can be. So we have this print num function which takes a parameter called num, which has to be a number type, and we are just printing out the num parameter. And here we have called the print num function 3 times, passing different arguments like 12, 92 and 2. And if we run this file, you can see that 12, 92 and 2 has been printed out. So when we call the print num function, we have passed 12 here, then the num parameter becomes 12 and we are just printing out the number. And same thing happens for these two function calls. That's a very basic thing, we all know that. A TypeScript generics is kinda like that. Instead of passing values as argument, in TypeScript generics, we can pass type as an argument. So let me give you another example. I will delete this code. I will paste another function here. So we have a new function, create new user, which takes a parameter called user, and that user has to be an object. And we're creating a new user object, and inside that object we're spreading out the user parameter, and we have added two more properties, active equals to true and power to 100. And after that we're just returning a new user. So let's create a new user here, const user, and let's call create new user, and we have to pass an object. Let's pass name to John and age to 21. And now if I console log the user, we should see the user object, and we have this user object. We don't have any TypeScript error. But let's try to access the name property. And we have an error. Property name does not exist on type, active, boolean and power number. But why is that? We shouldn't have any error. Well, in the create new user function, we have passed an parameter, and the parameter has to be an object. Okay, so we have passed an object here. Then we have spreading out that user object, which type was just an object. We didn't define any type of property and their value type. Then we have passed two more property, active and power, and after that we are just returning the new user. The new user object awares of these two property, but just because the user object doesn't have any type, that's why TypeScript didn't include any type to the new user object. It only included the active and power, because the user object can be anything. I have just passed name and age. It can have country, address and so many other things. So TypeScript didn't include that. And when I tried to access the name property, TypeScript didn't know that name property exists in this new user. So that's why it is giving us an error. So in this case, we just don't know what the user object can be. But you can create a user interface and pass that here. So let's just do that. So we have this user interface which has name string and age number. So instead of passing an object, we can just pass user. Now we shouldn't have any error, and you can see we don't have the error. Now TypeScript knows what properties are included in this user object. That's why we don't have any error. It will work, but let's think about another use case. Suppose you want to create new user with this create new user function, but different user have different type of data. Just because you pass this user interface, you are only limited to use these two property. What if you want to use more? And what if you don't even want to include these properties? How can you achieve that? Well, this is where TypeScript generics comes into play. Just like in this function, you expect a value as parameter, you can also expect a type as a parameter. This is what we call a TypeScript generics. TypeScript generics name is kind of misleading. I think it should be named type parameter or something like that. So let's see how we can use this type parameter, or I should say TypeScript generics. So instead of passing an user, go before the parentheses and put a less than sign and a greater than sign. And inside this, you have to give the generic name, or I should say the type name. I can call it whatever I want. I can call it just you or user, but most people use just T, capital T actually. And then you can pass T here. And now if I run this file, we should not have any error. And you can see we still don't have any error. John has been printed out on the console. And if I see the type of this user object, you can see we have the name property and the age property. Also, we have this active and the power property that are coming from here. So basically, TypeScript has taken the type of this object and passed it to the function, and T becomes this object type. So that's why new user object is aware of the user type. And this is the reason why we don't have any error. And here you can pass whatever you want. For example, if you want to pass country, you can pass that. And we still don't have any error. And you don't have to pass an object, you can pass whatever you want, and T will be equals to that type. For example, I will just pass a string here. And you can see we still don't have any error in the function call. Just ignore this one. We don't have any error in this line because T is now equals to a string. But if you want to specify that T has to be an object, you can extend the object type. So T extends object. And now we have error because BD is not an object, it's a string. But if you want to define the T type inside the function call, you can also do that. I'm gonna delete this extends object. And before the curly braces, again pass less than sign and greater than sign. And here you can define the T parameter. I'm gonna pass the user interface. Now when we call the create new user, T becomes this user interface. And you can see it is given us an error because type string is not assignable to parameter of type user. So we have to pass an object here. So I can just pass name of John and age of 18. But you can see we still have an error because I have passed age to a string, but age should be a number. So I'm going to delete these quotations. And now we don't have any error. And if I just uncomment this line, we still don't have any error. But what if you want to pass another property here like country? Now we have an error because country doesn't exist on the user type. So you can create another interface that will have the country type. So I can just extend the user interface. So interface user2 extends user, and I can extend the user interface here. I will just pass country, and country will be a string. And now I can create another user, const user2, and create new user. Create new user, and I'm gonna define the type T, and it will be user2. And I'm gonna pass another object. Name will be Jenny, and age will be 28, not string numbers, and country will be UK. And you can see that in this object we don't have any error. So basically this is what we call TypeScript generics. It is simply passing a type as a parameter instead of value. I hope you have understand now what TypeScript generics is. But even if you don't, let me give you another example. So I will delete everything from here except the user interface. So we have this name property and the age property. Suppose you want to add another property. I will call it extra info. So this extra info is some extra information about the user, but you don't actually know the extra information about the user. It can be anything, a number, maybe the user's favorite number, a user's favorite string, or an object, or maybe an array of objects. You just don't know. But you have to define a type here. You can just define a type any, but you know it's not a good practice, so we're not gonna use any. So you have to define a type. This is where you can use Typescript generics. So you can also expect a parameter. Again, I will call it t, and extra info will be t. So now let's create an user object. So const user, and the user will be user type. And let's create a user. Name is equals to John, and age is equals to 18. You can see that we have an error that generic type user t requires one type argument. So we have to pass a type argument. So I'm gonna pass a string. And now we have another error, that is property extra info is missing in type. So I'm gonna pass extra info, and I'm just gonna pass red. You can see we don't have any error. But if I just pass a number, we have an error that type number is not assignable to type string. You can pass an object or interface. So I'm gonna pass an object here. I expect color to string. So now we have a different error that type number is not assignable to type color string. So I will delete this, and I will pass an object, and I'm gonna pass a color, and color will be blue. And now we don't have any error. You can also expect multiple parameters. You don't have to use one. So I want to expect another parameter. I'm gonna call it just a. So I will delete this number, and age will be just a. And now let's pass the second type argument. I'm gonna pass number, and we don't have any error. But if I pass string, oops. And now we have an error. We expect a string, but we have a number. So let's fix it. Now finally, you can pass default type to the type parameter. For example, this type parameter a, I'm gonna give a default value. So pass an equal sign, and then give your value. So I'm gonna pass number. So by default, the age type will be now number. So if I just don't pass the number here, and you can see we still don't have any error. And if I just show you the type of the age property, you can see that age is now a number. So this is how you can pass default type to a type parameter. So that's all I wanted to show you today. Typescript generics is not a complicated thing. It is a very simple concept. I've tried to explain as simply as I can. I hope you have understood it. But if you still have any question, please drop them in the comment section. I'll try to answer them. So that's it. If the video has been helpful for you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel. And if you have any kind of suggestion or feedback that you want to give me, please drop them in the comment section. I would love to hear from you. You can reach out to me on social media like LinkedIn or Twitter as Dharanjan, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.